Okay, let's get started. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the public webinar on the Department of Toxic Substances Control, or DTSC's webinar on summary of findings on DTSC's information call-in on nail products. My name is Chin Xiao, and I am a public participation specialist with DTSC and will be facilitating this webinar. On behalf of DTSC, we are glad you are all participating today. Our distinguished panel members include Carla Palmer, Deputy Director of the Safer Consumer Products Program, Andre Algazi, Branch Manager of the Safer Consumer Products Program, Dr. Ann Cooper-Doherty, Supervisor of the Chemical Evaluation Unit, Christine Papagni, Supervisor of the Product Evaluation Unit, Dr. Dichle Yordimchi, Senior Hazardous Substances Engineer and Presenter, Tiglath Muradkin, Environmental Scientist and Team Member. Next slide, please. There will be one presentation with a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Please use the Q&A feature to type in your question. Use the raise hand feature if you wish to ask your question verbally. Instructions will be given later for those who are calling in. Next slide, please. Today's agenda includes a presentation on summary of findings on DTSC's information call-in on nail products, followed up with a Q&A session. The Q&A session will adjourn when there are no additional questions or at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, whichever comes first. The webinar presentation slides will be available on the Safer Consumer Products SCP Workshops and Events webpage. The webinar will be recorded and later posted to the SCP website. Please join me now in welcoming Andre Algazi, Branch Manager for the Safer Consumer Products Program, to give the opening remarks. Andre?
Thank you, Chin, and welcome everybody. We're really excited to be here to tell you about this project, which has been a couple of years in the making. So the summary report was published and posted prior to this webinar, and it's on our website. And if you are familiar with our regulatory framework, we look at specific candidate chemicals or chemicals of concern in consumer products. And one of our big challenges has been identifying product ingredients. The ingredient information isn't always readily available, and so we have to rely on a variety of sources, including databases. We've done some lab analysis of nail products, and this was a new endeavor for us, information call-in. This is some authority that was in our framework regulations that were finalized 10 years ago, and this was the first time we've used it. So we've found some interesting results, and I think you're going to find them interesting as well. Our first work on nail products predates the Safer Consumer Products Program. We published data on a project to test 25 samples of 25 nail products back in 2011, and we've done another sampling effort that we'll be talking about later this year. So it's all part of our effort to better understand which chemicals are in nail products, how prevalent they are, and then from that we can make informed decisions about possible regulation of specific nail products under our Safer Consumer Products framework. And also just putting the information out into the world is helpful, I think, for people to make decisions about manufacturing and purchasing nail products. So the team led by Dichle Yordimchi has done excellent work, and I think you'll find the presentation fascinating, as I have, and so I will not spend too much longer talking. I'm going to hand it back to Shin to dive into the presentation and what we're all here to hear about. So thanks very much. Thanks for being here, and thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Andre. Please join me now in welcoming Dichle Yordimchi to give the presentation on summary of findings on DTSC's information call-in nail products.
Hello, I'm Dicle Yardımcı. I'm a senior engineer with DTSC Safer Consumer Products program. And today I will provide you an overview of our summary of findings on DTSC's information column on nail products. Today's agenda includes SCP regulatory framework, DTSC's nail product efforts, DTSC's information calling request on nail products, and our summary of findings from that calling request. And at the end of this presentation, we will be holding a questions and answers session. Safer Consumer Products, also known as SCP regulatory framework, consists of 4 steps. The first step is the candidate chemicals list. This is a list of chemicals of concern that are listed by authoritative bodies because of their hazard traits or exposure potential. And this is a dynamic list. As new information becomes available, DTSC updates its candidate chemicals list. The second step is the priority products step. Priority product is a consumer product that contains at least one candidate chemical that has the potential to cause significant or widespread adverse impacts. And the third step is alternative analysis. In this step, once the priority product is adopted via rulemaking, manufacturers must conduct an alternatives analysis to seek for safer alternatives to the candidate chemical that is present in the priority product they make. And the last step is regulatory response. This is a wide range of possible regulatory actions that manufacturers must take to protect the public health or the environment. And the details of each step are also provided on our SCP website. And the link on this slide will take you to our SCP website. And as a reminder, during this webinar, my coworker will send the important web links via chat function. Please watch for the links in the chat. One of the products DTSC has been concerned about is nail products because nail products are very popular in the United States with the annual nail product sales exceeding $1 million. And nail salon workers are exposed to potentially harmful chemicals found in nail products more than the general population because they often work in nail salons that are poorly ventilated, and they often work more than 8 hours per day and 40 hours per week. Salon workers' exposure to these harmful chemicals is also an environmental justice issue because they are often immigrants with low socioeconomic status, and a lot of them have limited English proficiency. Therefore, they may have difficulty understanding the harms and the exposure potential of these chemicals. And additionally, salon workers are considered a sensitive subpopulation because often they are women of childbearing age, and some bring their children to work. Therefore, their children may be exposed to these harmful chemicals as well. To reduce the salon workers, their customers, and children's exposure to these potentially harmful chemicals found in nail products, DTSC has been evaluating nail products over a decade, and we have taken several efforts to reduce the salon worker exposure. We tested nail products, and most recently we conducted an analytical lab study on various nail products, and we will release a technical report on that study later this year. We also evaluated chemicals in various nail products from 2016 up to 2021. From these efforts, we proposed 3 different priority products. Nail products containing toluene was adopted as a priority product by a rulemaking effective by January 1st of this year. And we also propose nail products containing methyl methacrylate and nail products containing triphenyl phosphate as priority products. DTSC also published Healthy Nail Salon Recognition Program guidelines for local government agencies to voluntarily implement these programs in their jurisdictions throughout California to reduce salon worker exposure, as mandated by the Health and Safety Code. We also held public workshops to engage with stakeholders and share our findings from our evaluation of chemicals in nail products, most recently at a public workshop held in 2022. And details of DTSC's nail product efforts can be found at the public workshop recording on our website from that 22 public workshop. And we identified several data gaps during our evaluation of chemicals in nail products. Therefore, we decided to conduct an information call-in request from the nail product industry stakeholders. And in today's presentation, I will highlight the findings from that call-in request we conducted on nail products. As we mentioned, we identified several data gaps during our evaluation of chemicals in nail products, and we wanted to fill in those data gaps. We also realized that information on nail products was not readily available, and in general, there is lack of transparency on the full ingredient list of nail products. California Code of Regulations gives authority to DTSC to request information from product or chemical manufacturers, importers, assemblers, or retailers via an information call-in. And as a result of a call-in, DTSC publishes the responsible stakeholders on its website on a list called Response Status List. This list includes the company name and its response status. However, it does not include the information that has been submitted to DTSC. There are 3 possible response statuses for this list. The first one is response with information provided. This is the case when we receive the requested information from the stakeholder. Second one is response with information unavailable. This is when the stakeholder does not have and cannot create the requested information. And the last one is no response. This is when we don't hear back from the stakeholder or stakeholder decides not to provide us the requested information. Since this is the first time DTSC used its authority to conduct a call-in request, we had several preparation steps prior conducting the nail products call-in request. First, we defined the scope. We asked the nail product stakeholders to tell us what types of products they make or sell in California and what are the full ingredient list of those products. Later in this presentation, I will provide you more details on the scope. We put together a comprehensive stakeholder list. We also prepared stakeholder questions and nail product definitions. Stakeholder questions, product definitions, and the stakeholder list were shared with the trade associations to make sure we are asking the right questions, the product definitions were clear to the stakeholders, and our stakeholder list was comprehensive. We also held several meetings with the trade associations to address the stakeholders' concerns on submitting sensitive information to us, including trade secret and confidential business information, also known as CBI. We developed an information call-in module on our CalSafer site to safely and securely accept sensitive information, including trade secret and CBI. And we put together a CalSafer user guide that can assist the stakeholders on how to navigate on our CalSafer site that would like to submit to a call-in request. Lastly, we conducted our call-in request on nail products via sending a stakeholder notification letter to the nail product stakeholders, both via electronic mail and physical mail. And with that, DTSC conducted its first information call-in request on nail products that was initiated on September of 2020 with a 90-day response time. However, some of the stakeholders' contact information have changed. Therefore, they were granted additional time to account for the late notifications with a total response time of 90 days, which resulted in this call-in request closed end of May of 2021. And as we mentioned earlier in the presentation, with this call-in request, we wanted to fill in the data gaps that we have identified during our evaluation of chemicals in nail products. We also wanted to reduce DTSC staff's research time by contacting the industry experts. With this data, DTSC may identify potential priority products and identify and analyze potential safer alternatives. The link included on the slide will take you to our CalSafer site that you can read our call-in request on nail products in more detail. After conducting this call-in request on nail products, we analyzed the data and published our summary of findings in a technical report, which was released recently, and this report is also published on our SCP website. Link included on the slide will take you to our SCP website that you can access this report. And in today's presentation, I will highlight the key findings from this report. For this call-in request, we contacted 256 nail product stakeholders. And on the right-hand side, you see a bar chart which shows the percent of stakeholder types, and the numbers represent the number of stakeholder types that were contacted. Majority of the stakeholders contacted were manufacturers, that's shown in the gray bar on the bar chart with over 200 manufacturers. And the remaining stakeholder types included assemblers, distributors, importers, retailers, and trade associations. Trade associations were solely contacted to notify their members. Therefore, they are excluded from the response status list. We also identified 42 additional stakeholders, either owned multiple brands and need to be merged as a single entity, they went out of business, or they no longer make or sell nail products in California, were also excluded from the response status list. After excluding those types of stakeholders from the response status list, we identified 186 stakeholders to be published on the response status list. Of those 186 stakeholders, 33 of them responded to our call-in request, which corresponds to over 17% response rate. And on the right-hand side, you see the stakeholder responses by their response status. Of the 33 responders, 31 of them provided us the requested information, and those are shown in the orange bar with their information status shown as provided. And 2 of those responders indicated that they do not have and they cannot create the requested information, and their information status is shown as unavailable and shown in blue on the bar chart. The remaining 153 stakeholders, which corresponds to over 82%, did not respond to our calling request. That's shown as the gray bar on the bar chart, with their response status shown as no response. The link on this slide will take you to our response status list on our website for the information calling on nail products. And as a reminder, this response status list only includes the company names and their response status. It does not include the information that has been submitted to us. For this call-in request, we asked two sets of questions to the stakeholders. The first set of questions were focused on nail product formulations of the products that stakeholders make or sell in California, and what are the full ingredient list of those nail product formulations, including intentionally added ingredients, as well as residuals and contaminants present in their products, and their concentration ranges. We also ask about the functional use information of the intentionally added ingredients in nail products. Second set of questions were focused on nail products marketed with green or safer claims, and how are those products were different from the products that do not have such marketing claims. And the products, the ingredients for the products that are marketed safer for children and pregnant women. And we also ask about whether there are known safer alternatives to the potentially harmful chemicals found in nail products. And the detailed questions can be found in the appendix section of our report. For this calling request, DTSC defined nail products, and we shared those product definitions with the trade associations to ensure that those definitions were clear to the stakeholders. And those nail product categories included liquid powder system artificial nail products, UV gel nail products, solvent-based nail coatings, and other nail products. Products that do not fall under the first three product categories are categorized under other nail products. Each of these product categories have their own subproducts. Definitions of these product categories and their subproducts can be found in our report. To protect the confidential business information, DTSC provided a concentration range guidance table to the stakeholders that allowed them to report concentration ranges of the chemicals present in their products rather than reporting the exact concentrations. Those concentration ranges are defined in this table as follows, and the copy of this table can be found in the appendix section of our report. There were also some caveats for this call-in data. Due to the fairly low response rate of above 17%, this dataset may not represent the entire nail product market in California. And we received data from 31 nail product stakeholders in different formats. And due to this non-uniform reporting, we spent several months to format the data before we can analyze it. Also, there were some submittals had incorrect or missing data, such as the CAS numbers were missing for some chemicals or duplicate entries in a reported formulation. Therefore, we spent several months to clean the dataset before we can analyze it. And details of those data cleaning efforts and the assumptions we relied upon are provided in the appendix section of our report. And we also had some instances where the chemicals were reported with multiple concentration ranges in a reported formulation. For those instances, DTSC chose to use the upper concentration range of that chemical because we thought that could be the highest concentration range that chemical can be present in that reported formulation. This column report focuses on summarizing the information that has been submitted to us by those 31 nail product stakeholders in an aggregated form to protect the confidential business information. We removed the product names and company names from this report. This report only focuses on summarizing the findings on the chemicals that were reported in nail products that are identified as candidate chemicals on DTSC's Candidate Chemical List, also known as CC list. Of all the reported chemicals with their associated CAS numbers, 11% of them, which corresponds to 97 chemicals, were identified as candidate chemicals on our CC list. Chemicals that were reported in nail products that are not on our CC list are outside the scope of this report. And there were some chemicals reported as part of a chemical class in this column are also outside the scope of this report. As a context, chemical class contains chemicals that are structurally similar, but they may have different hazard traits or exposure routes depending on the chemical itself. DTSC has not made the evaluation of those chemicals reported in nail products via this column that belong to a chemical class at this time. As I mentioned, this report only focuses on the findings on those 97 candidate chemicals reported in nail products. Of the 97 candidate chemicals, DTSC previously evaluated 22 of them in nail products, and we summarize our findings in the report. Prior conducting this column request, DTSC was unaware of the 75 additional CCs that were reported in nail products via this column. 44 of those 75 CCs are on hazard trait-based authoritative lists with human health hazard traits, and the remaining 31 of the 75 CCs are either on an exposure-based authoritative list with potential exposure concern to cause adverse impacts, or they have environmental hazard traits but do not have human health hazard traits. I would like to show the CCs reported in nail products with human health hazard traits in the next two slides. This slide and the next slide shows the list of candidate chemicals reported in nail products with human health hazard traits. And to look up the most up-to-date hazard traits, we recommend you to refer to the authoritative list these CCs appear on. CCs shown in orange text are the ones that DTSC previously evaluated in various nail products. And the summary table included in the report also provides information on the prevalency of these CCs reported in nail products, their concentration ranges, and the types of nail products they were reported in. And as we mentioned, CCs shown in orange text are the ones that DTSC previously evaluated on in various nail products. There were a total of 22 candidate chemicals that DTSC previously evaluated in nail products that were reported via this column. And our summary of findings on those 22 candidate chemicals are provided in our report. There were 31 nail product stakeholders that reported over 1,300 nail product formulations in this column request. On the right-hand side, you see a bar chart that shows number of formulations by the four main product categories that were defined by DTSC. And orange bars represent the number of formulations that contain at least one candidate chemical, and purple bars represent number of formulations that do not contain any candidate chemical. As you can see, for all the product types, number of formulations that contain at least one candidate chemical are much higher than the number of formulations that do not contain any candidate chemical. In the overall data set, 95% of the reported formulations contained at least one candidate chemical. In this column, there were 39 different functions reported for the candidate chemicals in nail products, and a list of those 39 functions can be found in the appendix section of our report. On the left-hand side, you see a bar chart which shows number of formulations, reported ingredients with a given function. And on the right-hand side, you see another bar chart that shows percent of formulations reported at least one candidate chemical that fulfill the reported function. When you look at the left-hand side, you see that colorants, film formers, solvents, plasticizers, UV absorbers, and opacifying agents were the most prevalently reported functions of chemicals in nail products. And the right-hand side, you see that colorants, solvents, and plasticizers were the most prevalently reported functions with the highest percentage of instances where this function was fulfilled by using a candidate chemical. And in the next couple of slides, I will provide you our summary of findings on these three functions. Over 95% of the solvents containing formulations reported at least one candidate chemical as a solvent. There were 18 different CCs reported as solvents. Some formulations reported more than one CC as a solvent, and some formulations reported chemicals that are not on the CC list as solvents. List of those chemicals that are not on the CC list reported as solvents can be found in the appendix section of our report. However, DTSC has not made the evaluation of the safety of those chemicals that are not on the CC list compared to the CCs reported as solvents. But this finding may indicate that there may be safer alternatives to the CCs that can function as solvents in nail products. Ethyl acetate and isopropanol, also known as IPA, were the most prevalently reported CCs as solvents in nail products with concentrations up to 100%. Over 83% of the colorants containing formulations reported at least one CC as a colorant. There were 16 different CCs reported as colorants, and some formulations reported more than one CC as a colorant. Titanium dioxide, carbon black, and aluminum were the most prevalently reported CCs as colorants in nail products with concentrations up to 50%. Over 9% of the plasticizer containing formulations reported at least one CC as a plasticizer. There were 4 different CCs reported as plasticizers in nail products. Some formulations reported more than 1 CC as a plasticizer, and some formulations reported chemicals that are not on the CC list as plasticizers. List of those chemicals that are not on the CC list reported as plasticizers can be found in the appendix section of our report. However, DTSC has not made the evaluation on the safety of those chemicals compared to the CCs reported as plasticizers. But this finding may indicate that there may be safer alternatives to the CCs that can function as a plasticizer in nail products. Triphenyl phosphate, also known as TPHP, was the most prevalently reported plasticizer in nail products with concentrations up to 10%. Other CCs reported as plasticizers in nail products included diethyl hexyl and butanol, and tricrysyl phosphate. In addition to these functional uses, some CCs were reported as contaminants or residuals in nail products. However, only 5 of the 31 stakeholders reported contaminants or residuals in their submittal. Therefore, there may be additional CCs can be present in nail products as a contaminant or residual. Some stakeholders reported some CCs as contaminants, and some stakeholders reported the same CCs as residuals. However, stakeholders did not report the distinctions between the contaminant CCs versus the residual CCs. There were a total of 49 different CCs reported as contaminants or residuals in nail products. Dibutyl phthalate, also known as DBP, formaldehyde, toluene, and xylenes were the prevalently reported CCs as contaminants or residuals in nail products with concentrations up to 0.1%. As we mentioned earlier in this presentation, our second set of questions to the stakeholders were focused on nail products marketed with green or safer claims. However, only 5 of the 31 stakeholders responded to our questions on nail products marketed with green or safer claims. And based on the responses we received, products with green or safer claims were similar to the products without such claims. And some nail products marketed with green or safer claims may contain candidate chemicals. Therefore, there may be no basis to describe the products as safer based on the marketing claims. To summarize, 31 nail product stakeholders reported us information on nail products, and from the nail products formulations they reported, 95% of the reported formulations contained at least one candidate chemical. Of all the reported chemicals in nail products with their associated CAS numbers, 11% of them, which corresponds to 97 chemicals, were identified as candidate chemicals on our CC list. DTSC previously evaluated 22 of those CCs in nail products, and prior conducting this calling request, DTSC was unaware of the presence of 75 additional CCs in nail products. Solvents, colorants, and plasticizers were the prevalently reported functions with the highest percentage of instances where the function was fulfilled by a candidate chemical. Some functions fulfilled without the use of candidate chemicals, and that finding may indicate that there may be safer alternatives to the CCs that can fulfill those functions in nail products. Some nail products marketed with green or safer claims may contain candidate chemicals. and there may be no basis to describe the products as safer based on the marketing claims. Overall, this data set is important in terms of informing the public on the potentially harmful chemicals found in nail products. This data set also provided DTSC new information on the use of candidate chemicals in nail products, and it can help us determine on how to identify additional candidate chemicals for potential future evaluation. This dataset can also be informative for stakeholders that are seeking safer alternatives to the CCs that can fulfill the functional uses in nail products. Since this was the first time DTSC used its authority to conduct a call-in request, we had some lessons learned from this effort. We collaborated with trade associations and they helped us identify the right stakeholders. We also shared nail product definitions with the trade associations to ensure those definitions were clear to the stakeholders. We held several meetings with the trade associations to address the stakeholders' concerns on submitting sensitive information to DTSC, including trade secret and CBI. We developed an information call-in module on our CalSafer site that can safely and securely accept data, including trade secret and CBI, and this module can be used for future call-ins. We also realized that it is important to allow the stakeholders to report concentration ranges of the chemicals present in their products rather than requesting the exact concentrations. This addressed stakeholders' concerns on submitting trade secret and CBI to DTSC. And when we conducted this call-in request, DTSC had limited enforcement authority. There was no penalty to the stakeholders that do not respond to a call-in request, which resulted in a fairly low response rate, about 17%. However, in 2022, SB 502 amended the SCP regulations, now mandate stakeholders to be subject to a penalty if they choose not to respond to a call-in request. And lastly, we allowed stakeholders to report in different formats, which caused DTSC staff to spend several months to format the dataset. And this also caused several human errors, which resulted in DTSC staff to spend several months on data cleaning. For future call-ins, we recommend stakeholders to report the data in a uniform format to reduce human errors and also save time for DTSC staff on formatting the data and on data cleaning efforts. And with that summarizes our presentation today on the summary of findings on the information call-in request on nail products. I would like to acknowledge the SCP staff who worked on this project, as well as the OEAM staff who developed the information call-in module on our CalSafer site, and SCP management for their valuable feedback. After this presentation, we will be holding a questions and answers session. However, if you have additional questions after today's webinar adjourns, please feel free to reach out to us, and here is our contact information. And with that, we will now move on to the questions and answers session. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dichle. We will take this time for a question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question, click the raise hand function and we will call on you. Use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to type in your question. ask only one question at a time. We will not be using the chat function. If you are calling in, press *9 to raise your hand and press *6 to unmute. Please state your name and affiliation prior to asking a question. So I'll start with the questions that were typed in the Q&A portion. Wesley McLean asks, I see that you asked manufacturers to provide functional use information, but did you or do you have plans to also survey salons for functional use of these products? Many products are used off-label in salons, for example, mixing pigments into acrylic powder, using solvents for uses other than intended, etc.
So thank you for the question. This is Dicle Yardımcı, DTSC. So this call-in request was specific to the nail product industry stakeholders to gather information on nail product ingredients. So that will fall outside the scope of this call-in effort, but I can defer that to SCP management if they would like to add to that.
Hi, this is Christine Papagni, and I am the supervisor of the product evaluation unit at DTSC's Safer Consumer Products program. And at least at this time, we don't have any plans to survey nail salons themselves about functional use.
Thank you, Christine. So we have somebody who raised their hand. Pauli Ohia, please go ahead and please state your affiliation and your name and ask your question.
Hi, this is Pauli Ohia with the San Francisco Environment Department. Hi, Chin. Hi, Dicle. Can you talk a little bit about how DTSC defines a residual versus a contaminant? And is that explained in the report as well?
Hi, this is Dicle Yardımcı with DTSC. We asked nail product stakeholders to tell us the residuals and contaminants present in their products, but based on the responses we received, they didn't provide the distinction between what they define as a residual or contaminant. And as a part of your question, DTSC hasn't defined a definition for residual versus contaminant. That was actually the information we were hoping to receive from the stakeholders, but unfortunately, we didn't get a response. The distinction between two of those terminology.
Thank you.
Thank you, Polly. Thank you, Dicle. So we have an attendee asking a question on the Q&A section. Of the stakeholders that responded, what is their market share? Meaning, how much of the market do they represent?
So we had some of the stakeholders that responded to our request were key stakeholders. So we don't have the exact market data on their market share because that will be a separate database. But based on some of the rough market share data that we have from the databases we have access to, some of them can be roughly around 10 to 15% product sales in California. But we also had some smaller businesses that responded to us as well.
Thank you, Dicle. So we have a question from Paul Bryson. Did you account for the fact that some nail brands that you listed as quote unquote no response are part of larger corporations which did respond? For example, Gelish is part of Nail Alliance, Creative Nail Design is part of Revlon, OPI is part of Wella.
Hi, so this is Dicle Yardımcı with DTSC. We have identified 42 additional stakeholders that during our call-in request, they responded to us, and if they let us know that they owned multiple brands and named those brands, we actually merged them as a single entity and published them as their parent brand. But if they did not let us know specifically, we didn't have a way of knowing that. So they are published separately. And if you would like us to correct that information, you can always reach out to us offline after this webinar adjourns, and we can correct that on our list.
Thank you, Dichle. An attendee asked this question: what kind of translation services and outreach services do you have for informing salon workers of these potentially harmful chemicals in products, and also how they can find alternatives if interested? This may be a bit outside of the scope of this call-in report.
Correct. So that will be outside the scope of this call-in effort, although DTSC has a separate office outside of safer consumer products that can provide services, translation services, depending on a different effort that will require outreach efforts to the nail salons. For example, we have a health nail salon recognition program guidelines. And for implementation of that program, I actually closely work with Chin and his office that we translated some of that outreach material that were provided to the nail salon workers and owners. We put together a video and also a fact sheet that will help nail salons to implement those programs voluntarily to reduce salon worker exposure. Those were translated to Vietnamese, for instance. And I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, Dichle.
I'd like to add on just a little bit. If anyone has interest in, for example, the information call-in report being translated, they could request that.
Thank you, Christine. So we have a question from Alexandra Scranton. I think it's shameful how few companies responded to the call-in. Would the DTSC still want additional data if we can convince any companies to provide it now?
So as we mentioned in the presentation, when we conducted this call-in request, we had a limited enforcement authority, meaning that there was no penalty to the stakeholders that do not respond to our call-in request, other than publishing their response status as no response on our website. So that has changed for the future call-ins now. An amendment to our regulations will require stakeholders to respond to a call-in request. And if they choose not to respond, there will be a penalty for not providing us the requested information. But specifically for this project on the call-in request on nail products, at this time, I don't believe we will do another call-in request in the near future. And if anybody else wants to chime in on that one, and thank you for your question.
I'd like to add, however, if anyone would like to provide information to us at this point, we would gladly receive it.
And just one final note, this is Ann Cooper-Doherty with lead the chemical evaluation unit with SCP. I was just going to say, the only issue might be if there's trade secret information involved. So if that is the case, then you'd have to reach out to us because, as DJ was referencing, we have to have a specific way that that's submitted. But in general, we're always open and welcome and excited to get any information that stakeholders may want to provide us.
Perfect. Thank you. We have a question from Sabina Wiseman. Are there any regulatory agencies that are conducting the risk assessment of CC chemicals in nail products on human health?
So this one, to my knowledge, I can't give you an agency name unless any of the panelists have more information on that. But one thing I would like to add, so this is the information we compiled from the manufacturers, from the stakeholders submittal to fill in the data gaps we have that can help us on the prioritization of additional chemicals in nail products. And there potential harms. However, as a Safer Consumer Products program, we do not do risk assessment.
Thank you, Dichle. We have a question from an attendee. Can you send a link to the change of regulations for call-in enforcement?
We will look that up, and I'm a little bit multitasking, so I will try to find that. Or if anybody else has it quicker than I do, please send it via chat.
Yeah, we'll work on post that. It's SB 502 from the 2021 to 2022 session from Alan. So we'll get you a link to that.
If you can put in the chat before we close out today, because this is from an anonymous attendee. The next question is from Catherine Porter. Why aren't you making the ingredient information of each responding stakeholder public, given that you probably would not provide percentages to protect CBI? It would be good for consumers, nail salon workers, and owners to have that information.
So if I understood the question correctly, so it's asking about published ingredient information publicly for the companies. So a lot of the information we received actually is a trade secret or some were confidential business information. So we cannot publish the trade secret information by law. And for the other information that we received that doesn't classified under trade secret, then you will have to submit a Public Records Act request. And then we will still have to have communications with the stakeholders before we can release that information. So a lot of the information we received contained those types of sensitive information, so we couldn't publish that publicly.
Thank you, Dichle. So we have a question from an anonymous attendee. Did you all look at nail products / brands that are located in any European countries? I believe they have stricter guidelines, and I'm wondering if there might be lesson learned from those brands.
Hi. So this call-in request, DTSC only has authority to request information from the nail product stakeholders that make or sell products in California. So if they don't fall under that, then we can't officially conduct a call-in request. However, we can ask information and outside of a call-in request, so we can't make an official request because they're not required to respond if they don't sell or make products at the state of California. But it will be definitely helpful for us to have additional information about the products or brands being sold in Europe and comparison.
Thank you, Dichle. Before going to the next question, I just wanted to mention that in the chat, we posted the Senate Bill 502 in answer to the last question. So the next question is from Alexandra Scranton. Can you talk about any ingredients information overlap between the data collected from the call-in and the data on CC ingredients required to be disclosed to this California Safer Cosmetics database?
So we have not specifically checked against the California Cosmetics, Safe Cosmetics database against what has been reported. So that hasn't been included in the report. However, that's something we can definitely look into. I just don't have an answer for you right now, but we can follow up offline.
Thank you, Dichle. From an anonymous attendee, they ask, you mentioned that there is no basis for a safer products, and some safer products are not actually that safe. While this information is extremely helpful, I find it also challenging to translate to salon owners and workers what products and brands they should buy. Can you comment on what safer products and brands can be recommended to salon owners and workers?
Thank you, Chen. So we had responses from only 5 of the 31 stakeholders that responded to us. So we only had a few answers on the products marketed safer or green. And based on those responses, we received, some of them indicated that the products with green or safer marketing claims were similar to the products without such marketing claims. We also had instances that some of the products marketed with green or safer claims also contained candidate chemicals. So based on those responses, there is no basis solely based on the marketing claim. We can't say it's safer or greener just looking at the marketing claim. Those products, the full ingredient list has to be evaluated to determine which products are safer or greener. Unfortunately, we don't have that information to tell the salon workers and owners which products and brands are safer at this time.
Thank you, Gishle. So an anonymous attendee asks, how is the information you receive from stakeholders different from the ingredient list normally provided on the products?
So often with the nail products, not all the full ingredient list are available on the product label itself. And some products only have marketing claims such as they're marketed as toxic tree-free, like free of formaldehyde, toluene, or dibutyl phthalate. But there's no information about what is actually in the products. So for this calling request, we ask about the full ingredient list of the products, and also if they had any contaminants or residuals to report that. And usually those residuals and contaminants are not reported on the product label as well. So this information has more detailed ingredient information and contaminant residual information that's usually not provided on the product label.
Thank you, Gishle. An anonymous attendee asks, is there any ranking as far as hazard level goes for the CCs, especially when assessing safer alternatives? For example, acetone is overall less dangerous to human health than toluene, but both are CCs.
Thank you, Chin. So candidate chemicals are listed on our CC list based on if they appear at least on one of the 23 authoritative lists. So they will be automatically added to our CC list. And that list is dynamic. So based on the new information becomes available, we update our CC list quarterly to reflect those changes. And between the CCs, for your question, so both acetone and toluene, because they do appear on at least one of the authoritative lists, so they will be automatically added to our CC list. However, when we evaluate the hazard information and how we prioritize the candidate chemicals to look at in nail products, we also look at other things such as how prevalent are those CCs reported in products? What are the exposure studies available? What are the concentration ranges of those CCs? And what are if there are any indoor air studies, we look at like the endpoints based on the concentration coming off the product, based on use. So we look at a lot of different parameters when we do our evaluation on prioritization of those CCs.
Thank you, Gishle. Question from Minthu Lei. Does the ingredient section on SDS include everything in the product?
Thank you, Chen. So I believe SDS stands for Safety Data Sheet. So typically, safety data sheets do not have every single ingredient that's in the product. They are, to my experience, they have listed majority of the components of some of the chemicals on the safety data sheets, and sometimes they don't even list concentration ranges are listed as a range, so not as an exact concentration. And also, in some cases, there could be SDSs without any concentration information, so it would be just a chemical name, or sometimes they may have incorrect CALS numbers to the corresponding chemical listed on an SDS. So SDSs might have incorrect information.
Thank you, Dichle. So right now, we don't have any more questions or comments. So I just want to remind those of you on the phone, if you are calling in and want to ask a question, please press *9 to raise your hand and I will call on you. If you're watching this webinar, you can type in your question in the Q&A section, or you can raise your hand using the raise hand button. So just give it one more minute for any last questions or comments.
Jen, I'd like to provide a follow-up on the previous question about ingredients on safety data sheets. As Dichle said, not all the ingredients are not listed on a safety data sheet for nail products. And there's a requirement that the chemical ingredients only be provided for chemicals that are a quantity of 1% or greater in concentration, or 0.1% or greater for carcinogens.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Christine. So I'm not seeing any more questions or raised hands coming in. Okay. So please join me now in welcoming Dr. Ann Cooper Doherty, Supervisor of the Chemical Evaluation Unit, to give the closing remarks. Ann Cooper?
Jen, before we do that, actually, two quick things seem to have just popped up in the Q&A. Sorry, as you were closing out.
I see that. Thank you. Okay, so an anonymous attendee asked, could you provide an example of a product categorized as other nail products?
Sure. So if you refer to the more details in the report, so we defined 3 other product categories. If they don't fall under that definition, we categorize them under other nail products, and we provided a list of what those are. And just to give you an idea, for example, nail polish thinners would fall under other nail products. That's how we define it. But if you look at the nail products information process section of the report, you will find a list of those other nail products with more examples.
Thank you, Dichle. And an attendee asked, Christine, if you can repeat what you just said.
Absolutely. So regarding safety data sheets, they do not contain all of the ingredients in a nail product. A safety data sheet is required to provide the chemicals in a product that are considered hazardous and at a concentration of 1% or greater, or 0.1% or greater for chemicals that are carcinogens.
Thank you, Christine. Any last minute questions or comments? Okay, I'm not seeing any more coming in. Ann Cooper, would you like to give the closing remarks?
Yeah, I saw one pop in. I was like, oh, but it just says
there's another one.
No, it's not.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, so like Chen said, I lead the chemical evaluation unit for SCP, and just wanted to say thanks so much for everyone for joining us today, and that we really appreciate your continued engagement with SCP on the years of work that we've been doing on nail products. To that end, we really look forward to continuing to share our work with nail products with you. Look forward for those announcements later this year, including things like our lab study, which will provide even more information about what we found about chemicals and nail products. I think we've provided the contact information, but please reach out if you've got any questions or follow-up. We really appreciate that engagement. And then just wanted to say a huge thank you to Dichle and Chen and the rest of the DTSC staff who've worked on not just only putting together the webinar, but also the huge amount of work that it took to put out this info call in and get all the information and digest it and put it out in a report. So hopefully it'll serve as a great resource. We appreciate you joining us here today. Turn it back over to Chen.
Thank you, Ann Cooper. This concludes our webinar today. If you have additional questions, please contact us after the webinar. To get updates on DTSC's SCP program work, please join our e-list. This webinar is now adjourned. Thank you for joining us today. Have a good day. Bye, everyone.